Just about me, I've been in the SciPy community, well, in the scientific computing community for around 10 years, but I am like a serial community person. I just dip my toes in all of this, so I do things for PyLadies. I'm also part of the Carpentries and Our Ladies. I'm also an editor for JAWS, and I work in all of these things. And I think I've been very lucky to be welcome in all of these different communities and in all of these different environments. And this has given me a very, very broad perspective, not only of the scientific community or the scientific computing community, but also the problems that we all are facing together. And just as a bit of a warning, I'm just going to very, very lightly touch on harassment, bullying, and burnout. So if you feel uncomfortable or that triggers you in any way, please feel free to leave the room at any time. And I'm going to start with a story that some of you are going to be very, very familiar with. And this is a story of Grandma May. And she's an amazing baker. She has this very, very legendary cookie recipes that everybody loves. She makes these cookies and brings them to every single family meeting or every birthday party. She's also a member of a Hacking Grandma meetup, and she brings her cookies there, and everybody loves them. If there is a charity bake sale, she'll make their cookies, and they just sell within minutes. But recently, Grandma May has been thinking that she's not getting any younger, and she's starting to wonder what's going to happen to these recipes or what's going to happen to these cookies when I'm gone. And then she started to evaluate her options. Her first option is to sell her recipe and make a lot of money. Then her second option is to start her own company selling cookies and probably other baked goods and get her employees to sign NDA so that nobody ever gets the recipe. Also because she's well versed into hacking and tech and everything, she's thought about open sourcing her recipe, and probably she has many other options, but she hasn't spent too much time thinking about it. So what do you think Grandma May decided to do? She decided to open source her recipes. And as you can imagine, this has a lot of implications. Well, she's well versed, so she knew that she had to attach license, made it public, made a recipe public, and set clear boundaries on what people could and could not do with a recipe. And even though it's public, even though people are allowed to use it or mix it, the IP still remains with her. Also, she had to make sure that others that were interested in making the recipe better or tastier can do it, that they could actually interact with this recipe. And by doing so, then she also entered in this dilemma of people saying, hey, Grandma May, let's add chocolate chips to your cookies because they're going to be awful tastier and everybody will love them. So she said, okay, that sounds like a very good contribution. But then a week later, somebody said, let's add walnuts. And Grandma May had to make a hard decision and say, well, we're not going to add nuts because that is going to reduce the number of people that can enjoy the cookies because, you know, people have allergies. So then she started doing all of these things. And she also has less time to bake. Now, she can sometimes not make it to her grandma meetups, well, hacker grandma meetups, because she's now herding cats, and she's not only responsible for a recipe, but she's responsible for an entire community. She's responsible for having these hard conversations and telling their contributors, sorry, I can't accept this new feature because the community wouldn't benefit from it. And all of a sudden, this is how Grandma May has become the maintainer of a big open source project. Simply because she cared enough about it, people loved the project as well, in this case, the cookies. So I imagine this sounds very, very familiar. This is how a lot of people start a project, they love it, and they decide to make it so that other people can enjoy it as well and benefit from them. And they're pushed pretty much by inertia into a leadership role for which they've been given very little preparation or no preparation at all. And although we've seen these red lights here and there, and these discretionary warnings on this is what maintainers face, or these are the issues that you're going to encounter, we realize that, in fact, becoming a maintainer or a community manager or a community builder is like opening a very, very big can of worms. There is a very high burnout incidence because in many cases, in most of the cases, the number of users and contributors and factors influencing the project outweighs the number of maintainers or developers. Also, she's faced, or maintainers are faced, with making very, very hard decisions about what should go or should not go in a project, what roadmap or implementation should be done. And also, because of that, they are victims of harassment and bullying from all of the same people that are using the project and love the project. And we cannot deny that us being able to contribute to open source in a certain capacity when it's not our primary job is a privilege. That means that we have extra time, extra spoons, extra battery and energy to do it in most of the cases. So when you put all of these different pieces or all of these different issues that the maintainers, developers, and community managers face, not on a single basis, but on a very, very regular basis, they start questioning themselves. Is this worth it? Is this extra time and effort that I am putting in here absolutely worth it? I love the project, but do people love this as much as I do? And also something that people don't tell you is that over life, your circumstances are going to change. Probably you're going to have less time because some people will make decisions to pursue a different career, have a family, move abroad, or simply they're just so worn out that they decided that they want to do something else with their time. And that's okay. It's totally okay. That's how life goes. And how do we kind of help to overcome some of these issues? By something that I call inclusive leadership, and I've been working a lot with people in Mozilla about. And I like adding this intentional inclusive leadership word, or intentional word around it. And this inclusive leadership cycle invites us as community managers, maintainers, and developers to think about the whole process and how we interact with our contributors and our community in a more holistic way. From how we're actually inviting them to interact or contribute to the project, to how we're going to onboard them and make sure that they have a place that is meaningful to them. But giving these people a place just by allowing them to contribute or have an opinion is not enough. We also have to empower them to do what they want to do. And as in most cases, we also have to have regulatory processes so that we can review how we're doing in our project, how our contributors are engaging, how our people and our governance models or positions of leadership are doing, and recognize the value that they're bringing to the table. And then also we should have mechanisms to renew this process. And it's not a single, when we start a new project or a new community, we don't do this just once. We continuously go over the cycle as our community grows. So I'm going to just cover some of these steps, and the first is invite and onboard. And I like using this picture of the coffees, of the different coffees, and this is to reflect the diversity of voices that we have to invite to our table. And I don't like to just say diversity in the sense of a single dimension, but all of the dimensions that my community covers. And there are so many ways to bring these new voices to the table and include them in conversations. The first is having open, safe, and active communication channels. Making sure that somebody is always regulating them, making sure that you have processes to protect your community, to protect your maintainers, your developers. Another venue is to organize developer community events. A very good example of this are sprints or community workshops. The Jupyter community has been doing a very, very good job in starting these developer community events. Also, as it has been mentioned before, we sometimes struggle to get people beyond coding. And sometimes we're not very good at design or very good at web development. But we can work with these intersectional communities to bring a wider set of skills or a wider set of interests that will complement those that we're lacking or those that we're not very strong at. And something else is reach out to people, including those from underrepresented groups, especially those who don't believe they're good enough or technical enough to be included in this project. And we have to keep in mind that when we're inviting new contributors or new voices to our table, the very first contact pretty much determines the rest of the pathway. I'm sure, probably some of you will have been in a situation where you tried to understand how a tool worked or wanted to contribute to a project and you just found that initial barrier so overwhelming that probably you decided not to contribute to it. If you are very, very resilient and very confident in your skills, probably you went over that barrier and decided that it was worth it. But many people will decide not to go over that barrier and stay there questioning whether they're suitable or whether they're technical enough. In this sense, an initiative that I started running this year at PyCon was the Mentor Sprint for Diverse Beginners. And this was an avenue to support both the contributors and the maintainers to be better prepared to bring these new voices. On one side, we were actively asking the contributors to specify what level of engagement they wanted to have, if it was just for the sprint or if they were looking for a long-term mentor to interact in a project. We also were interested in saying what projects or what area within the Python ecosystem they were interested in contributing. We had people that just wanted to contribute to any project. They were like, I have no preference whatsoever, I just want to give back. Some others had very specific interests like deep learning or machine learning, or some others were very, very web development focused. On the side of the maintainers, we actually encourage them to think beyond these coding actions. And we had projects that put together first-time issues around documentation, around creating a tutorial, or just discussing the roadmap for features. We were also lucky enough to have people from Adafruit that brought some of their boards and had people in our sprint or in these sprints to hack on this and try different codes and different tutorials and just work with new pieces of hardware. But this made it very, very accessible for those people that had never, ever had an interaction on how to contribute to an open source project. And we received a lot of feedback. We asked maintainers, mentors, and contributors to send feedback. And a very, very recurrent theme was this, saying that people never thought that their code skills were good enough to contribute. They thought that they were not skilled enough, and they needed this gentle push or this safe environment for them to try contributing back to a project. And all of this started planting a little seed. I was very, very lucky to have other 3 co-organizers for PyCon US, that were very experienced developers and also very experienced community managers. But actually, I started planning this over a year ago and ran the first 4 iteration at PyCon UK. That helped me to understand what were the main barriers that underrepresented people or just beginners in general face. And they reportedly said that the most daunting task is going to the issue tracker and just finding a single issue that they can work on. People can spend hours looking at that because there are issues that are marked as beginner-friendly or first-time issues, and they're not, or they're not perceived as such. Then the second iteration was over Hacktoberfest, where I liaised with PyData Manchester and Hair Plus Data. And we run 3 events around this, so that gave us enough continuity to see the progress of the people involved. The next step was running PyCon ESA. That is what I've already mentioned before. And the response was so good and so positive that I'm returning back to PyCon UK. We are partnering with Microsoft to run a longer Hacktoberfest event. I've been approached by 2 Django conferences so that they can run their own versions of this mentor sprints, and I'm going to be running this mentor sprints in SciPy. And people say that if you're going to dream, you have to dream big. And my dream for this would be that as we have these sprints or regular sprints in every SciPy or PyCon, there is also a mentor sprints for diverse beginners. It's not scalable if it's me going from conference to conference to run it. Of course, I would love it, but I just can't be everywhere. So again, I'm going to be in this position. The Grand May was that I cared enough and I loved enough this that I'll have to think about a way to scale it. And some of the things that I'll have to think about, and we all maintainers and community managers have to think about, is effective onboarding. Starting by setting clear expectations and limits to our developers and contributors' times and effort. And also providing mentorship or pairing less experience with more experienced people in our contributing and leadership roles. And something that I really, really like is what the Binder Hub project is doing, where they have these staggered levels of contribution. Someone that starts becoming a more frequent or a more regular contributor to the project start as a team blue. As they get more involved and start thinking beyond regular contributions in terms of documentation or code or issues, and start thinking more towards the governance and sustainability of the project, there is scale towards team red. But also they have mechanisms in place in case anyone is in different life circumstances and you have to step down because anything happens. And they have a special team that is Team Green. But for you to be able to do all of this, you also have to have a set of guidelines that regulate the interaction between all of your members and make everyone accountable, from those that are in your positions of leadership to these new contributors or those that are running the community events to get more contributors into your project. And whenever I think about the code of conduct, I like thinking of the Carpenter's one, because it has been developed over many, many iterations, but also in conjunction with the community, taking the interests and the safety of the community at heart. And we also always focus so much on those that are in our current leadership position, but we also have to have mechanisms to empower the leaders of the future. And this is something I've been working very, very hard on the Society of Research Software Engineering. We are these folks that fall between this researcher or research only and software engineering positions. So it's the people in the middle. They become the glue between pure researchers and software engineers and try to make research better by writing better scientific code. For a very, very long time, this career path or this role has been very underappreciated or not recognized. So we've been doing a lot of work to build this community. And it just turns out that these research software engineers are community managers, community builders, maintainers, developers themselves. So the best way that we can keep our communities thriving is by empowering them. And this has meant creating specific workshops, meetings, and spaces for them to develop their leadership skills, and also safe places where they feel like they belong. Building scenarios where they feel like they found others with the same issues, with the same interests, and where they can be themselves. And finally, probably the hardest part is also being able to recognize how you're doing and determine when it's good to step down. Because offboarding is as important as onboarding people. We cannot deny that people are eventually going to leave because circumstances. So what mechanisms do we have in place to make sure that our project is going to survive that? And we have to think very, very clearly about what sustainability means to you and what sustainability means to your community. There is a very nice piece by Daniel Katz where he evaluates what sustainability means to different people or different stakeholders, from a developer to a funding agency to users. But having regular check-ins helps us keep our community healthy. And this is something that I've been thinking very, very lately. And I've had discussions, for example, with Sarah about how do we protect our maintainers and our developers so that they don't have to get to this breaking point to step down. Many people wait until they're at a very severe step or a very severe stage of burnout to say, this is enough, and I need to take time. I need to take control back of my time and my life and my effort. I didn't know which is the right way to do it, and this is something that I would really like to work on. Find a way to identify good mechanisms to support each other and support our maintainer community so that people don't have to get to a breaking point, so that they have to step back. So to summarize, we have to be very intentional about leadership and diverse leadership. And that doesn't mean that we're ticking quotas or that we're ticking checkboxes to say, I have this many representations or this many layers of diversity, but actually thinking about the entire process or the entire path of every developer. Make sure that we have both onboarding and offboarding processes, shall we ever need them. And also define clear expectations. This is a very good route to avoid burnout. Empower the leaders of today and tomorrow. We are trusting people to come in and nurture our project. So we also have to empower them and trust them that they have the best interest in place. And have continuous evaluations, have continuous steps to evaluate our processes, evaluate our policies, and improve them. And to remember that it's okay to step down. It's okay to look after ourselves. Sometimes we stay there in a project because we care about it and we love it and we've put so much effort into it. But it's also good to recognize when it's time for you to take a step back and leave it. Thank you.
From the audience? Very bold question.
Hi.
Question I have is sort of like the community building work, the outreach work, right? Like, how do you do it in a way that you don't end up disproportionately like, okay, right, bluntly, community outreach work tends to be done by women, underrepresented minorities, right? It tends to be done by people we're trying to reach out to. So how do we, and it's good in a way in that we model who we have, but how do you end up not leading to A, burnout, and B, devaluation, because those people are doing that work, and right, if you're doing that work, you don't have time to do the core, the technical work.
Yeah. It's very easy, and I think this burden often relies on people from underrepresented group because, you know, you tend to put people that will bring the similar kind of people that you're interested in attracting. And there is where building bridges becomes very, very important. And working with these intersectional tech spaces and intersectional communities to reach out to more people. And also having for example, running the mentored sprints, I know that I started that because I love it, but now I have to think about I can't do everything, and I just want anyone else to be able to do it. So having, again, clear processes and checklists and review points. I love checklists. This is what you have to do. These are all the things that you have to do, and it will be good if you could assemble a committee of these people. And having, just try, also sometimes being able to, again, take the stance and say, I'm not going to run another Women in Tech event or another, I don't know, Black Lives Matter is useful, and start bringing allies.
I guess what I'm thinking of here is sort of the, right, like, when in the projects where the work won't get done, if an underrepresented person from an like won't do it, do you just like at some point be like, that's what the project decided, or like do you end up, it's like self-sacrificing, right?
Yeah, I think it is also that part where I say that you have to set very clear expectations and limits. So if someone, let's say that you're being onboarded to a specific project to contribute with code, and eventually you're being asked to only do outreach, if you have originally said these very clear expectations or these very clear limits, it's easier for you to say, it's okay for you to say as well, I don't want to do this, or I was not brought up to do this. And then think about strategies in which other team members can contribute to that. But it's that very clear expectations and very clear limits that have to be set so that there is not this slippery slope or this set of tasks that are just dumped onto you.
Hi there. So my question is, in terms of the checking in with other members of your development team and those sorts of empathetic, soft leadership skills, how would we as a community go about educating our own leadership teams to do those sorts of things more regularly? What are some strategies that you would recommend?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if there is a trainer, maintainer. I don't know. There is no such a thing. But it's something that it would be beneficial to everyone is also starting documenting that. I know we hate documentation and we don't have time to do it. But I'm sure a lot of people will have different ways to do it. And it's just all kept as very guarded secrets. And we need a support group for community managers, I think.
So while I'm walking over here, I'd like you to tell me what the best license for a cookie recipe is.
Oh, I don't know. SciPy?
Chocolate chip, bye.
Chocolate chip pie.
So to follow up on the previous question, how can we sort of look, or what do you think are the big challenges, and how can we look broader beyond sort of pure project communities? So you mentioned, for example, RSEs, or the research software engineers. In my experience, they tend to be looked down on by either the pure research community or by the pure software engineering community. And how can we engage with those communities to sort of build up respect for RSEs?
I gave a talk about that actually, and it's all about creating value and showcasing how you're bringing value to different stakeholders. We've been in places where researchers say, "Hey, you're you're not researchy enough and you're not producing grants. And then the software engineers are like, well, you're not technical enough and you don't have these practices, so how are you going to be evaluated? Are you writing papers, or shall I evaluate you because you're writing 500 lines of code per day? But it's about finding strategies to demonstrate the value that you're bringing. And sometimes this value can be, well, I'm helping you to run your research code better. It's reproducible. I'm advising you on how to better manage your data and your code. And that leads to further impact. It can be collaborations by making your science more open or your research more reliable. Other ways is a lot of grassroots advocacy, and it's interacting with the researchers and understanding what their pain points are and find ways to work together. But I think the key point there is value, highlighting how to bring value and this special skill set that is missing.
Thank you very much. Let's give Tania a round of applause.